Thank you so much for having me on your show so that I can contribute to your community. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And before I dive in, we talk a lot. Me personally, I do a lot of solo episodes on this topic as well. And we're just unpacking all the changes that happens with our hormones as we're aging, especially with diabetes. Blood sugar turns out to be even more chaotic as we're getting older. And we are advocates here, myself included, of hormone replacement. But I'm also an advocate of foundational things and natural practices that we can first bring in because I'm something this is something I did when I was in perimenopause, and I've shared that a lot with my listeners as well. So they know a little bit about my story. But I like all of this because it's really nice to have different options and just to kind of see full picture about ways that we can support ourselves. Primarily with type 1 diabetes, which is really who my listeners are. But I think this conversation is going to serve all women no matter what, right? Yeah.
Totally. Let's hope
Yeah.
so.
Yes, yes. So tell us a little bit. So, what is your story with this area of health? Because I think many of us have a story attached to why we do, why we do what we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like the old adage, like your mess becomes your magic, right? So,
Yeah. Can.
I actually became an acupuncturist. I was in the film business and I fell out of a crane rigging a camera and I got injured at work, and acupuncture was the first thing that kind of put me back on my feet again. And at the same time, this was before the Me Too movement. Camera women in the camera department were really a minority, and we had to really keep our periods and having to go to the bathroom. I know this sounds really crazy to say to
It's okay.
people, but we had to keep it really under wraps because we were like considered weak if we couldn't not go to the bathroom. I mean, it's again crazy to talk about now, but at the time, I also just saw so many of my camera sisters just kind of have to suffer in silence going to work with painful periods and a lot of women's health conditions. So after I got my first acupuncture degree, I started doing more research on fertility, women's health, all the things that could serve my camera community at the time. And I started treating my friends, my sisters at work. And I found it so powerful that they were then educated. The tipping point was just so powerful and transformative for these women that I started realizing that I really wanted to have a deeper, wider impact with my work. So I got a doctorate degree in acupuncture and research on around women's health. And then it just kind of one thing led to another. I started focusing a lot in the past 12 years. I've been in the trying to conceive and fertility space. And more recently, because I'm actually myself in perimenopause, started conducting studies at my own clinic with some new patient base around perimenopause and just kind of seeing how I can identify those pattern clusters that we call them in traditional Chinese medicine frameworks, and seeing if I could give my new community something to educate and empower themselves with.
I like that. And your community, like all of our communities, tend to stick around for sometimes years. So inevitably, we're all going to reach perimenopause and menopause. So it's just like following them through all these cycles of life and hormones. So that's pretty special. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, well, you just mentioned something, and before we hit record today, you asked me if I'd ever done acupuncture, and I was honest to say, no, I haven't. But I'm definitely open to learning more. So I know I'm not alone in this. So this is exciting for us to learn how this practice can help us. So could you kind of give us kind of a high view of, or a deep view, however you want to go into this, as far as what it is and how it can help um, women specifically?
Yeah. So, reproductive health acupuncture is really having a heyday now. So, acupuncture is under the umbrella of traditional Chinese medicine or Eastern Asian medicine frameworks. If you think about that term as the umbrella term, we think of it like almost like a whole systems medicine, where there's spokes of this umbrella, and those spokes are the different interventions or opportunities that we have for healing under our medicine, right? So we have things like warming therapies like moxa, cupping, gua sha, And then the acupuncture and the herbal medicine, right? So those are almost like the salt and the pepper, or the right and the left hand of the medicine. They really complement each other in this interlocking model. We also help treat people really comprehensively through dietary therapy, which can be really powerful and transformative as well. Acupuncture in and of itself is, if you think about there, like this is more channel principle, but if you think about a meridian system as almost like a freeway, right? Moving through the body, and energy is moving through that pathway. And then when you sometimes are in high amounts of traffic, or it's rush hour and you're at one exit and you know that that exit is always really blocked or stuck, what the acupuncture does is, within the insertion of a tiny needle there, we can unblock that stagnation in that one area, so that the energy or chi can free flow through your body. So in recent years, this is the second part of what you were talking about.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
in recent years, reproductive health acupuncture has really been in a heyday almost, because we're getting the results of randomized clinical trials that show us that using acupuncture for this lens can help with the relay between the HPOA axis, which is the hypothalamus pituitary ovarian adrenal axis. So that almost like, and that part of the endocrine system, and that feedback loop. It can get better blood flow to the reproductive organs, which is really important, particularly in the trying to conceive space. And it can regulate that cortisol, regulate that stress response, right? So regulate that nervous system. So those are the three things that can really help balance hormones when we're thinking about balance in hormones. We want to try to keep things as close to normal or homeostasis as we can. And a lot of times that's not just seen on a lab value, right? We want to look beyond that lab value and look at the person right in front of us and see and give them the information that they need in the moment of the time that they're experiencing the symptom.
Is this something, it sounds like it's more of a reactive, or I'll just back up. If acupuncture, and ideally we use it as a preventive
Yeah.
tool, not necessarily to put a fire out, or to, I'm personally thinking of some things that I have going on with my own body, just some tightness. And, these are some things I'm working through with like a physical therapist, and, stretching, and, all those things that we're kind of taught and that we can go get treatment for. But my mind obviously goes to these other things. There might be something, just like what you said, a pathway is probably blocked. It probably is. And I wonder if acupuncture could unblock my pathways. So when it's coming to these things, and I know if it's speaking to me, I know it's speaking to, the listeners here as well. It's just the light bulb might be going off as to, well, this might be an option.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. In our framework, we call it well care. It's not sick care, right? So in a Western intervention or that insurance-based model, somebody that that's very not close to your health and not intimate and isn't familiar with your health is telling you what you can afford, or like what they'll pay for in terms of your insurance coverage. And maybe that's not what you need at the time, right? Like if your arm is falling off and you're bleeding, maybe they'll take care of you, right? But in TCM frameworks, what we're doing is you have a healthcare advocate with you at all times. So in the early times of this medicine, there was a physician that was the emperor's physician, and that physician was responsible for keeping the emperor as healthy as possible. And when the emperor got sick, the physician got fired. So
That's some pressure, right?
So when you think about maintaining health, there's this notion of doing that. Like ideally, like you should see an acupuncturist at least twice a month, right? So just to have a dialogue with somebody and check in and make sure that you're making those adjustments that you need.
Okay. And you mentioned something as well, and this is what I understand because I've seen acupuncture. I've heard people talking about their sessions. So it's very site located. Is that how it works? For instance, if gosh, I'm just using an example. Like for me, and I'm going to go ahead and use myself as an example. My hips are extremely tight. So my hip flexors are just bound up right now, something I've been working through for a while. So is that an example of something that you can go get some acupuncture for to help open up that area?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great example, actually.
Yeah.
So, like in that example, what we would do is use a bevy of modalities.
Oh
So
no, not a
we would
bevy.
do like a bevy.
No.
Yes.
I knew it
So,
was a problem, but I didn't
yeah,
realize it was a bevy
yeah.
worth of problems.
So it just depends. It depends on the acupuncturist,
Yeah.
right? And it's really interesting because we have all of these different ways to like it's creative latitude to really approach the person and meet the person where they're at, right? So for an example like hip flexors, what we would more than likely do is a balance of distal and local points, which are points at the site of the pain or the tenseness or the tightness, and then we have to unblock the blockage from farther away, right? So that's a distal point. And then at the same time, like you might want to consider things like cupping can be really helpful. Moving farther away from the actual tightness, like into the lower back, might be helpful, or into the quadricep groups. But the gallbladder meridian in and of itself has a character. It's a character, right? It moves all along the side of the body, and it almost flip flops at every joint, right? It's really interesting to watch. And so we say that that also has the propensity to be associated with decision making, like you have a lot of gall. So
Love
there's some
this.
really deep meaning sometimes to the meridian systems as well.
Wow. That's really interesting. And
Yeah.
yes, this has really got my own brain working as to what I could be doing just for myself. Or I appreciate that. So when because I know you really focus on pregnancy and fertility and just trying to maximize that stage of life for women. And a lot of the same things I think that are disrupting our hormones as we're aging, and in the statistics, you could probably maybe statistics of the infertility rates, and there's a lot of things impacting that, environmental and just societal stress and all the things that maybe that mom to be is kind of facing, as opposed to say 20, 40, 50 years ago. It was just a different time. But do you see that connection as well? Not that the result would be any different, because you're still going to care and kind of decide what it is that's kind of preventing the pregnancies. But are you seeing a difference nowadays in those
In the
infertility?
in the numbers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we can move this. Well, obviously, infertility is a global public health issue, so
Sure.
much so that, I mean, not to get into male factor that much, but the World Health Organization continues to lower the acceptable semen parameters every 10 years, right? So
Mm,
it's like that's the only way that we have at our fingertips. Yeah. So it's a massive, massive issue, and there's a lot of things that go into that, right? External environmental factors,
mhm.
generational toxic load from toxicants from even World War II is really interesting to see. And then culturally, we have a lot of people starting their family planning later in life. But in terms of perimenopause and menopause, like what we're seeing on the other end of that is that in this year, 2025, it's estimated that over 2 billion of our workforce are going to be in perimenopause or menopause. So that's a staggering number, right? So we
Mhm.
have half of our it's a massive amount of our workforce is coming to work like tired with brain fog and can't function, and we all pay the price, right? There's like this massive gap in productivity now because we're not we're not supporting half of the population and half of our labor force,
Yeah,
right? With the right
yeah.
education and the right empowerment. So it's a massive crisis right now. So I guess the question is like for my segment of the profession is like you can be on one side of this coin or the other, right? You can either learn how to treat it and like figure out how to manage this and like provide the tools, or you're just going to fall behind. This has to be
Yeah.
part of your vernacular.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just as a healthy and productive society, yeah, this is something we've really got to look closer at. I had no idea the number. That was something I was trying to get a good solid
Oh,
number about as
I have
far as
the,
how many. Yeah,
I can
2
share screen. Can I
billion.
share screen?
That's a great question. You know what? You could probably send it to me after we record, and I can definitely include it into the video. So I'm
Yeah.
not quite
I'm
sure.
actually giving a talk on this
Oh, wow.
tomorrow, a community lecture on it, and I have the data right here, and I have the slide right here. But it's really interesting. It's the
Yeah.
annual economic impact of perimenopause and menopause,
Wow.
and then it's the projected number of women missing work due to menopause is it's going to be 1.8 million by the
Wow.
end of 2025.
That's incredible. And
Yeah,
work is just part of the equation. We're talking family, relationships, and
yeah,
obviously the relationship with herself. I know that's a big reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. The type 1 diabetes community is smaller, obviously, in comparison to the numbers, but we are mighty. We're already living with a chronic disease, and then
yeah.
we're told that, oh, well, you're just going to have to do what you can with it. And, there's no real ways around it. Blood sugar is going to be harder as you age. But as we continue to learn and, learning about acupuncture and these natural remedies, and like I mentioned before, I am a big proponent of hormone replacement and educating women on those options and the long-term benefits. So speaking of, what is that something that you prescribe or give tips on, I should, or educate on as far as your client population, your patient population, as far as hormone replacement?
Yeah, so basically, one of the things in the gap is in hormone replacement therapy. I find personally, when with my experience, just because based on our clinical study right now, is we're handing out hormone replacement therapy like it's like a birth control pill, and so we've created this like one size fits all, every woman kind of solution for something without monitoring, right? So if you think about serum testing or blood tests, right, that only gives us, again, going back to our freeways, if that's only us, if we take a blood test, we're only looking at hormones through like a snapshot in time, a moment in time. That traffic camera is going to look differently at 4 a.m. than it does at 4 p.m. It's too ephemeral. So one of the things that can be a really powerful tool for monitoring the HRT concurrently is something like a urine metabolite monitor, right? And these are D2C kits and they're available. They're pretty ubiquitous now. But what you can do is you get a full spectrum. The patient themselves, the consumer actually can see right then and there what their estrogen level is, what their luteinizing hormone is, and what their progesterone is. So whatever intervention they decide, if they decide to do HRT or they decide to do something like herbal medicine or acupuncture, they're going to see that intervention and like what it's doing directly. And so I've actually really also really powerful because it allows collaboration and it allows the patient to have correlation, right? So it's really when you're spiraling, I don't know about you, but like when I'm spiraling out of control around, and I know this stuff, right? So like when I wake up and I drink a cup of coffee and I start flashing, I'm like, "Oh my God, why is that happening?" Right? If I had just looked at my test, right, I would be like, "Oh, okay, I had an estrogen decline. I had an estrogen dip, right? Like what do I do about that this
Yeah,
time, right?
yeah,
Like this is going
yeah,
to be okay."
yeah.
And it gives them some terra firma so that they actually don't feel like nobody's listening to them, right? There's
Hmm.
a whole
Hmm.
community out there and a lot of these kits that can really support you and take care of you.
Right, right, right. I like that idea. Symptom first. We always say that too. We got to trust how we're feeling. And I know that same patient is coming in to see you because she or he knows something's not right. So there's a reason they're coming. There's a reason they need relief for something. And menopause symptoms are the same. There's always been this, well, there's two sides of it. Whether testing's necessary, at what point do you test? But we know how we feel, especially with type 1 diabetes.